Whole meeting. First, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Snanawas First Nation. Before we get started this evening, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our new CAO, Prab Lashar. Lasher. my apologies. So, on behalf of council and the community and staff, I welcome you to the District of Lantzville. And even though this isn't our a regular meeting, this will have to do. All right, so we'll go into the agenda. So we got adoption of agendas. I'll move that the September 10th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda be adopted as presented. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Lerner. Any additions, deletions? Okay, hearing nothing, I'll move to calling the question. All those in favor, opposed, that's carried unanimously. Okay, that takes us on to public input. So I don't see anybody in the gallery, so I will save my breath. Anybody remotely registered this evening? Nobody, thank you. That moves us on to new business under 7A. So we have the Committee of the Whole, official community plan, residential update. So Mr. Robinson, you're gonna lead us through all this. Thank you very much. When you're ready, and how do you want to handle questions as we go through, or you're going to pause? What would you like to do?
Actually, there's a couple places that would make sense to pause for questions. So perhaps we'll do questions as we go through, and then if I'm happy to answer any questions at the end as well.
Sure, sounds good. All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you for joining us today. I'm keen to update the Committee of the Whole with provide a comprehensive project update on our OCP amendments to comply with provincial housing legislation. So a bit of a background, and we'll talk a bit about the project process and everything else. In the fall of 2023, the province passed a slew of housing statutes related to development financing, transit-oriented development. But really the crux of the matter that we're here discussing tonight is the Bill 44 Housing Statutes Residential Development Amendment Act. The province set a series of timelines for municipalities to meet in order to comply with the changed provincial legislation. The first one was June 30th, 2024. There was a mandate to update zoning to comply with the Bill 44 requirements of 4 units a lot where water and sewer are present, and to pass a transit-oriented area bylaw. So council accomplished that. You got a little red tick up there. By December 31st, the district was required to complete a housing needs report and report to the Ministry of Housing. We complied with that deadline. We did what's called an interim housing needs report, and that's an important piece that I'll explain later. It was an update to a housing needs report that the RDN had completed several years ago on for us as part of the regional growth strategy update. So we got a red tick next to that. You did that on time. And now the last little piece of the deadline related to the Bill 44 legislative changes was by December 31st of 2025, every municipality in the province is required to update their official community plan to incorporate the housing needs and the other items in Bill 44. So you recall earlier this year, we set a project schedule and a work plan that council endorsed. And I've pulled out the Gantt, we call this a Gantt chart. It's basically a chart explaining the project milestones as you go through time. And so we had a tight 12-month window to do all this work, so we planned it all out. Last time the Committee of the Whole saw this would be the March 19th, I think it was, Committee of the Whole. Staff have took the recommendations and everything else away after that meeting. Have been conducting public engagement as directed. We used part of our housing capacity funding to retain 2 summer students from May 1st to August 31st to help put all the paperwork and do the analysis and draft everything for us, which was really good. My planner Adam and I have been working with them, so it was really good to have a couple extra hands on the project, and we thank them for all the work they did. In this quarter, we've published the findings both online and we conducted the open houses, and we'll talk about the public engagement report later in this presentation. And then the next milestone, which we're at today, is the September Committee of the Whole meeting. And so this is an opportunity for members of the Committee of the Whole to provide their feedback on the draft amendments after the public has had a kick at the can, ask any clarification questions and everything else, and refine the amendments as needed before staff finalize the bylaws and bring bylaws for introduction. We have a tight 3.5-month window to pass these bylaws and get them off to the ministry. Otherwise, we are in non-compliance, and I would advise against doing that. That includes having a public hearing for the amending bylaws and the usual 4 readings. Tentatively, staff are planning on bringing the bylaws for first and second reading on the October 8th regular council meeting. So Bill 44, the Housing Statutes Residential Development Amendment Act, has a new requirement to update the official community plan to incorporate housing needs reports. As you recall, Lantzville's housing needs report was reviewed at December 4th meeting and subsequently sent to the Ministry of Housing, and it's also, you can also find it on our district website. Housing needs report said we needed to accommodate 840 units of housing over a 20-year time period, and this is the time period that the province has said that we need to incorporate and plan for these housing units in our OCP. Small-scale multi-unit housing is how we're going to be able to accommodate these 840 units. And I'll go through all the math with you here, so bear with me until I go through all the math, and then I'll take your questions about this. So Lantzville implemented the 4 units where there's water and sewer before the June 30th deadline, as I mentioned. You basically, if you look in the zoning bylaw, there's a table. And the one table says if you have water and sewer, you get your 4-unit allotment. And the other side of the table says if you don't have both water and sewer, it's a house and a secondary suite or a carriage house, same as before. So in line with provincial guidance, we can count the zoning capacity that was created by that mass upzoning. For example, an existing house with a carriage house, 2 dwellings with water and sewer, the maximum on that parcel, because it has water and sewer, is 4 dwellings. We minus the 2 dwellings existing, so then we have a zoned capacity of 2 extra dwellings. So 4 minus 2 is 2. You've definitely seen this map before. It's the area in Lantzville that is residentially zoned has water and sewer. So out of that is the 874 residentially zoned parcels with water and sewer. So we take 874 times it by maximum of 4 dwellings per parcel. In theory, if all of those parcels redeveloped, you could get a maximum of 3,496 units. You take away, because all of those parcels that I've indicated in the math have an existing house on them. So you take 3,496 minus 874 existing houses, gets you 2,622 remaining units. And then I had our summer students go through all of our building permit records for this area. And there are 28 secondary suites and carriage houses, because I wanted to make sure that we had an accurate count. And that leaves us with a zone capacity of 2,594 dwellings, which exceeds the 840 units that we need in the housing needs report. So good news, we potentially have upzoned it by 3.08 times the required number of units. This doesn't include subdivisions like Clark Med or the future phases of the Foothills, because those lots haven't actually been created yet, as this final subdivision approval for each stage of those developments hasn't gone through. So this just counts the existing parcels that are in Lantzville right now. So that is the math on the zone capacity review. The province has said that we need to include this math in the council report with the bylaw. Municipalities that don't make the minimum housing needs in the housing needs report will also need to update their zoning to add those accommodations. But we don't have to update the zoning. We're just doing the OCP policy piece, because we've blown our housing needs out of the water just because of what was required last year. So are there any questions on this math? Yes, sir.
I'll let council have first crack through to council. Any questions? And Councilor Mandel, I can't see you right now because we have the presentation. That's okay. But do you have any questions?
Not yet. This information was in the package, so
That's correct.
Keeping up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So through to Director Robinson, I did have a question just regarding the 28 building permits. Do we know the time span of those? Like when did, the start and end time to those, when those were issued, over how many years?
That's a great question, sir. I believe the majority of them would be since the zoning bylaw was updated in 2010. 20 to permit, to widen the permissions for secondary suites and carriage houses. So the majority of those units were probably from that. I understand there were some historic ones that were issued that we were able to count, but the vast majority of those 28 would be since 2019.
Okay, thank you for that. And not to go down a crazy rabbit hole here with all this, what I'm curious about is with those 28, how many were likely for existing residential lots, like not newly created ones, but existing,
The
like
vast
infill?
majority, sir. And some of these permits were also suites that people had built in their basements or in their houses that then once they were legal, they came in to acquire a permit to legalize it so that they could get utility billings and all the other things set up for the suite.
Okay, I'm just trying to differentiate between like the, new construction.
Sure.
So if with new construction, would they have to have a separate building permit for the principal dwelling versus the carriage house, or
Sometimes they combine
it
it. We did comb through all the building permit records, so if there was a house that was built with a suite and it was combined all in one permit, we counted that.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Jones?
Yes, thank you. With the suites, how many of these suites are you counting them based on how many have business licenses with the district? Is that how you get
Building
the
permits
number?
from the district.
I think if you have a suite, you also have to have a business license to manage a suite. Is that
Only,
correct or
only
not?
if it's being used as a short-term rental.
Okay, so how confident are you in the numbers for the number of suites in Lantzville? And what exactly are the numbers for suites?
For this represents the area that, again, if we go back to this map, it represents 28 suites and carriage houses in this area. And I'm with 95% confident in the numbers.
Okay, so of those, how many are suites?
28 secondary suites and carriage houses.
So is it correct to say that this says there's only 20 secondary suites in all of Lantzville?
No, that is not correct. There
That's
are
what
only
I'm asking.
28, sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't understand your question, but now I do. There are 28 suites within the yellow and red area on this map. Though it has water and sewer.
Yes, sorry, I should have been more clear. So are you confident there are only 28 suites in Lantzville in homes that have water and sewer?
These are 28 suites that have come in for building permits.
Okay,
So
so there could
if somebody
be more.
just added
Yeah.
a suite to their house and none of the neighbors ever complained and nobody ever found out about it, it could be existing without permits right now.
Thank you. That is a number, for sure, whatever it is. Thanks.
Any other questions or shall I proceed?
Looks like we're done with questions for now, so go for it.
Excellent. All right. So that's the zone capacity review. I'll incorporate that in the council report so that ministry can see that we're complying with that requirement. I want to get into the draft chapters that we took out for public consultation. So the first one is section 3.2 policies on the regional growth strategy. So the Local Government Act requires that all municipalities in British Columbia incorporate what's called a regional context statement, which basically says how are you complying with the goals in the regional growth strategy. So that's how we tie local planning decisions at the municipal level in with regional planning at the regional district level. So since the OCP was updated in 2019, the RDN board passed an updated regional growth strategy in 2024. So we basically took the existing goals that were in the section 3.2 and updated them with language to address the updated goals in the 2024 RGS. This is a legislative requirement, so since we're updating the OCP and we need to do this, this is something that we had to do. We reviewed the edits with the RDN staff. They made some minor, like, use this word instead of this word kind of really minor edits. And then the version that you see in attachment 1 is the final copy with the RDN edits from the RDN staff, as well as any public input that was received on this one. I don't think anybody really commented on this. So I'll pause here. Are there any questions about the regional context statement?
Councillor Savage.
Okay. So the regional context statement. What's listed here on pages 11 to 14, these are the sum total of all the changes that are made in that section.
The draft, all the drafts in attachment 1 that's attached to your council agenda.
So basically, it's 3.25, 3.29, 3.210 that have changes from what I can see. So we're assured that as we go through this, that there are no changes other than these that appear in these pages?
This is the draft copy. If you have any questions or comments on them, I'm happy to make some modifications or edits. But if we did have any edits to this document, we'd need to go back to the RDN and make sure that they're okay with those edits.
Okay, so when we get the text of this with the changes versus what existed before, this will be the sum total of the changes as to what we're seeing in these pages here.
Again, we've gone through the process of editing, consulting with the RDN, and what you have before you is what's changing.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lerner and then Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I think my confusion was that I think I figured out what the changes were. And I think in the context of the regional context statement, it was quite specific. There was like a paragraph that was swapped out. If possible for 3.2 and any of the other sections, when it comes to before us, this is a committee of the whole, but when it comes before us as a bylaw reading, it would be very, very helpful if it was possible to see like some sort of track changes like they have in Word, something to see where the changes are made. Because I was kind of going, I had the old copy and the new copy, and I was kind of going back and forth page by page, word by word. So, but I think when it comes to the regional growth strategy, I have no concerns with this. I know it's a legislative requirement and that the RDN approved it. But that's my only feedback, is just being able to see those things in sort of a track change would make it helpful. Thank you.
Sure, and if I can just speak to that, we will have one of those prepared for when the bylaw comes before council. It's just not available for this meeting. I understand members of council did email inquiring about this, and I sent correspondence through to the CAO about responding. So council communications really need to go through the CAO.
Okay, CAO Lasher, yeah.
So I just want to say there's a few reasons why you didn't get track changes. Was one, it wasn't available. Two, getting one person emailing staff back and forth is not really how a municipality works. It has to go through the CAO. And by the time we got 4 different emails, we were already busy doing other stuff. So if it's not available, we can't give it to you. And lastly, as George mentioned, we are going to have a tracked version for you in October, 100%. We just did not have one available or ready and couldn't do it.
Okay, Councillor Jones.
Thank you for that clarification. Just so you know, we weren't even aware that your start date and everything, so that email was sent without that knowledge. No problem, obviously, communicating through you on these things. For me, I have the OCP here, but the OCP I have here isn't even the most updated OCP. So that is one thing that, for me, perhaps others on council, it would be good if we got an updated OCP. And then with the pages here, I don't know how many they are because they haven't been numbered, but I assume when you do the track changes, that will change. It's extremely difficult to try to compare these 2 documents. And that is why I sent that email asking for the track changes. I've spent hours and hours trying to go through it. And there are places where the titles of sections are changed, and I'm sure there's good reason for that, but it does then make the comparison absolutely impossible. So there's limited input that I can have at this time. That's basically what it boiled down to. Thank you.
Yeah, CAO Lasher. Oh, Councillor Mundell, I know your hand is up, but we're just hearing from staff first, and then we'll go to you.
I'll try to tackle that one, sir. Through your worship to the committee, duly noted. Again, we'll have a red line version for the bylaw adoption. I also want to note that once this, these big policy documents can become very unwieldy. And as you know, there's been several minor different kinds of chapters, updates. Council actually did an update to the OCP last year that isn't in the office consolidation. So once we complete this bylaw in December, Adam and I are going to work on a new consolidated copy. And so we'll also be printing a new consolidated copy for members of council once we get through this process, because we're just kind of holding off until we finish this last big change, hopefully not too big, but this last change, and then we're going to do an office consolidation for all of the little amendments that have happened over the last couple of years and roll everything into one big shiny OCP copy. So hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Mundell?
Sorry, if Director Robinson could just repeat when that is going to be ready?
Through your worship to the councillor, then I'm hoping spring, because this process is going to wrap up either in November or December, and then we'll get to work on an office consolidation, hopefully with things that are a little bit quiet in December or January.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. My comment was also to the effect that it's difficult to determine what's the changes are, and that as much as I appreciate this meeting, for me is more of an information only. I won't be able to really weigh in on the changes because I wasn't really be able to identify and find them very easily as compared to the previous version. So I thank you for the work on that, and I very much like to see the track change version, and maybe for future reference, if there's an email that does come out, I mean, a response could be that as we will get to that for the next meeting rather than no response at all. That would be appreciated. I'm pretty sure we do all know that things go through the CAO, but as Councillor Jones mentioned, it's hard to know exactly when things were starting and when work was taking on. So anyway, some better communication in the future, I hope.
Yeah, I'm just going to caution council for this is starting to get into a bit of a open criticism of staff, and it's not the time or place for it. So I would, respectfully ask that we limit our comments to the business that's in front of us rather than criticizing staff. We have to recognize staff gets an enormous amount of emails coming in, and just to have staff be expected to respond instantaneously, even within 24 hours, sometimes 48 hours to a council inquiry is not always realistic. So I'll leave my remarks there, but let's just simply not go there. Doesn't sit well. Thank you. All right, so continuing on, Director Robinson.
Yeah. Any other questions about the regional contact statement? Fantastic. We're going to get into the residential land use policies. This is attachment 2 to the report. So there were updates to section 5 policies on the rural residential, estate residential, and residential designations that are required to incorporate Bill 44 items. Housing policies that address each class of housing need from the housing needs report were determined to not be required, and were not included as per council direction to only prepare the minimum updates that were necessary. These were items that the province had issued guidance on and were guidelines, so staff did not incorporate them. I even clarified with the ministry regarding required versus guideline items, because I'm keen to keep to council's direction. So draft updates in section 5 are included as attachment 2. I'm going to break through each one and kind of do a high-level overview of the changes that were made to each subsection. So updates to section 5.2.5, the rural residential policies. Reorganize the section to better follow the other residential sections so that all the residential chapters kind of follow the same sort of flow, with permitted uses moved to the top of the list, and then density, and then other specific policies that kind of cascade through there. For the rural residential policies, we maintain the existing minimum lot size. Rural residential has no service lots. So it was very easy. We didn't need to incorporate a lot of things. We added a note on policy for the Bayview Park Drive for clarity. Basically, this item was in the 2019 OCP, and then it was corrected. The zoning was for that area was corrected as part of the 2020 zoning bylaw that came out. So those two items were tied together as part of that big update project. Their draft updates are included in attachment 2. Happy to take any questions on the rural residential piece at this time, if there are any.
Okay, through to council, any questions? Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So if I could get an explanation, please, on the 20th page under 5.2.7 residential, numbers 10 and 11, the last 2 points under this section. I'm curious, just to give a background, that Bill 44 mandates 4 units per lot with sewer and water on smaller lots, but does not mandate that higher density must not be on bigger lots. For example, there's a 12-acre parcel right on Lantzville Road across from Huddlestone Park on sewer and water. And why would they not be entitled to do a strata development with many homes, seniors' homes or whatever? But these 2 new things that have been added, these don't exist 10 and 11 in the current OCP. From what I can see, Bill 44 doesn't mandate it. So is there a reason why we've made this change, that in both 10 and 11, it states that basically anything bigger than the 40, 50 meters squared lots will only be entitled to 2 dwelling units, one being a house, and I assume the other being a carriage house or a suite. And this is, to me, a new policy, and why would a large property be prevented from maintaining that lot size but having a strata, which is common for seniors housing complexes, to have a 1-lot strata but with a number of homes on it?
Sorry, Councillor, I think you're referencing 5.2.7. We're on 5.2.5 right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I will be getting to that.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Jones.
Thank you. This is in, Director Robinson, thank you, in 5.2.5, point number 7. No, sorry, point number 6. Just referencing it to the current OCP, which says this district does not intend to extend full municipal services to rural, agricultural, or forestry areas of the community. Oh, sorry. This is why I didn't want to say anything tonight. It's so hard comparing them. I'm sorry. Yeah, never mind. It's just it's too confusing. I got off.
If I can help, Councillor, sub 6 and 5.25 is the same language in both versions.
Thank you. I realized that while I was talking, and I think what I'm trying to reference is point number 8, which says the district may introduce lot and building site guidelines as part of the subdivision review process. But I do not have a question about it. Thank you.
Okay, any questions on these two before we move on? Okay, go ahead, Director Robinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moving on to updates 5.2.6, the estate residential policies. So we reorganized this section to better follow the other sections, moved permitted uses to the top of the list, because it seems like whenever somebody has a question about, what can I do, it's always we always reference the permitted uses, and they were organized in different orders. So they're at the top of all the new sections. We added new density limit for areas with water and sewer to match Bill 44, existing density based on the estate zone minimum lot size. So the majority of the parcels in the estate residential OCP designation are also zoned estate. So it's the same zone, same land use designation. So basically what we did is we matched the density that's allowed in the estate zone with the density that's now allowed in the estate residential policy, because we remember we had to update the zoning bylaw last year, and now we're updating the policies to match that. So we maintained existing density for non-serviced areas, so that's the same. You clarified the existing policy around cluster development. So if you'll note that under 5.2.6, sub 5, we've broken it up into A, B, C, D to clarify the policy and link it with the residential policy in 5.2.6.1. So there was, and section 8.5, which allows clustering provisions. So that's just clarity, because that was something that we got a lot of questions about. So it was an opportunity to clarify it. There's no new permissions that are added to that section. It's really just reorganizing and adding another section reference. So updates to 5.2.6, the estate residential policies, they're in attachment 2. Happy to answer any questions you have about that.
Through to council, any questions? And Councilor Mundell, I can't see it, but I'll check in. Or actually, I'm looking across to,
Councillor Mundell left the meeting a couple minutes ago.
oh, did she? Okay. Did we lose connection, or did she? No, okay, just because if so, then we have to stop the meeting and try and reconnect, okay. All right, okay, next item.
Excellent. 5.2.7, residential policies. So we reorganized this section to, again, kind of flow better with the other residential chapters, sections, I should say. Permitted uses moved to the top of the list. Added new density limit areas for water and sewer to match Bill 44, density based on existing minimum lot sizes. So that was the chart that council asked to put in July. So that's in there. And we added a table. These are the current residential zones, the minimum lot size, and the density per hectare calculation. We maintain the existing density for non-serviced areas. So if it's residentially designated, but does not have both water and sewer, the density that was in the OCP prior to these updates is maintained. We added, and to speak to Councillor Savage's earlier question, we added policies number 10 and 11. The intent here is to preserve larger lots where SMU does not apply. So it's to...
Yeah, sorry, as a point of privilege, just wondering if you could speak right into the mic so I don't miss this. Thanks very much. I just have the air conditioner here. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely, sir. Happy to do that. So policies number 10 and 11 are to preserve the larger lot sizes where a SMU does not apply. So it says the district will prioritize the preservation of larger residential lots by permitting the development on SMU on parcels of 450 or smaller. And that's right out of Bill 44. So they're looking at applying SMU between a range of 280 square meters and 50 square meters. And if you read into the very long small-scale multi-unit housing guidebook that the province put out last year, and I will bite my tongue on what I think about that, the intent was that I think the province estimated that parcels that are over an acre may be better candidates for future subdivision. So they only wanted the SMU privileges to apply for parcels of an acre or less, but they set a minimum of 280 square meters. Now, there are very few, if none, lots in Lantzville that are smaller than 280 square meters. So in this case, we're just saying that we're prioritizing the development of small-scale multi-unit housing that's allowed as of right in Bill 44 on lots that Bill 44 says should apply. So that's number 10. So the 11, the district will limit development on lots exceeding that size to a minimum of 2 dwelling units per lot consisting of one house. This aims to balance the community's desire to increase housing options with the needs to preserve low-density residential character of larger properties. If the property was zoned R1, for example, they could subdivide in order to accomplish what they needed to do. Or, like as you indicated, they could stratify. A parcel I believe you're thinking about is in the village designation, the one that's right across from Huddlestone. So that's not designated residential. I'm not sure if that helps to answer your question, sir.
No, I'm aware of everything you said. However, I remember the policy manual. It simply says that the assumption is lots larger than that 48 meters squared will be subdivided. It doesn't say that you can't have, density on those lots without subdivision. And so therefore, I don't understand why a new policy's been made that's not mandated by Bill 44 when there's examples of lots in R1 that have sewer and water that are now, with this new policy, being deprived, in my mind, of having a strata development where it's basically one lot without subdivision with such things as clustered seniors' homes or starter homes and so on. So if it's not mandated by Bill 44, my understanding is we wouldn't be making changes that weren't mandated by Bill 44. I'm just wondering why these two are in there.
So in the residential zoning table that I referenced earlier, the table applies based on water and sewer and lot size, which is what council passed last summer. In the case of a larger lot, greater than an acre, they could apply to council for rezoning, or they could subdivide and then develop on the subsequently smaller parcels. Cottage courts and other forms of cluster housing are not permitted in Lantzville without a rezoning application.
Yep, okay, well, thank you. I'll leave it for the council debate, but the subdivision tables just say what people can do. It doesn't say they have to do it. So I'll leave it to the council debate. I was just wondering what your reasoning was. Thank you.
Councillor Lerner?
Yes, maybe I just can seek some clarification around this same topic for numbers 10 and 11. I respectfully see it a little differently than was just discussed. My understanding on the provincial website is that lots that are 4,050 meters squared are exempt from Bill 44. And if I understand, and please through to staff correct me if I'm wrong, but 10 and 11 basically say exactly that Bill 44 says that 40-50 meters square is exempt, and this 1011 says 40-50 meters square is exempt, but it doesn't actually prohibit any kind of subdivision or application for more units. That's just my personal understanding, is that Bill 44 specifically cites that number as what will be exempt, and the motion passed by council was to only do the Bill 44 amounts that were the lands that were not exempt, in other words, that were required. So that's my understanding, but maybe I am getting this backwards.
No, Councillor, you're correct.
Further comment from council? For myself, these are policy statements. It makes sense to me, and I think when you look in the zoning bylaw, and I think it references R8 for this for these properties. I think that's what it ends up being. So I think you're allowed to do a house or a duplex, and that's it. Is that? Maybe I'm wrong.
Sorry, again, I'm not entirely sure. I believe the parcel that Councillor Savage was referencing across from Huddlestone is designated in the village designation, so that has a different set of policies.
Yeah,
to
true.
apply.
Yeah. I was just speaking in generalities anyways, so.
No, I do.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
so the policy statements make sense to me, but I kind of hear what Councillor Savage is saying as well, you know, this by no means is replacing the ability of the property owner to do an application essentially, so, which I think we would want anyways, so. Councillor Jones?
Yeah, so for me, the way I am reading this is it says that the district will limit development on residential lots exceeding 50 meters squared to a maximum of 2 dwellings per lot. So let's say you have a 5-acre lot and you'd like to use 2 acres of it to put on a higher density than what that statement requires in order to have green space on a larger portion of green space on the remaining. Well, the problem you have is you can only do 2 dwelling units per lot. So if you leave your 5 acres as 1 lot, you're stuck with 2. And if you start dividing it up to, say, 5 1-acre lots, you're stuck with 2 dwellings per lot. Where's your green space? So it seems to me this statement is prohibiting higher density strategy as a way of ensuring that there is green space alongside development. Could you speak to that, please, Director Robinson? Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Absolutely, Councillor. I would say that in the situation that you're referencing, policies 4 and 5 would better apply. So policy 4 says the range of lot sizes the new subdivision encourages, density bonus averaging, clustering provisions in the different sections of the OCP apply. Where density bonus averaging and clustering are applied in residential areas outside the village's special plan, it sets a minimum target size. The target lot size is the same as before. And then for purposes of calculating the averages, the land is parkland, including bonus parkland may be included. So the idea is that the policy is encouraging clustering development. The policy is encouraging bonus parkland dedication above what's required in the Local Government Act. And then policy 5 there deals with farm clusters. Both of these kinds of development would likely need a rezoning application, so they come before council. But how it would be endorsed and supported through the OCP would be sections 4 and 5.
Thank you. So then I need help understanding how point 11, it seems to me, is in conflict with 4 and 5, because it says the district will limit development on existing lots. So I don't understand the point of number 11. It actually seems to almost contradict the points you've just summarized for us, 4 and 5 and 6.
Again, the way I read it is that under 4 and 5, if they wanted to apply for that, that would take precedence over 11. 11 is just a general limit on development, but if they want to comply with other sections, that's how they demonstrate compliance.
So this is simply interpretive. I'm interpreting one way and others may interpret another. To me, that speaks to needing, perhaps we need more clarity.
Sure. Well, I would also say that the way that 10 is worded largely captures the intent of section 11. So if council wished, we could strike section 11 and just keep section 10.
I think that would be helpful. If it's possible for 2 different people to interpret number 11 in 2 different ways, then that to me is a problem, and OCP should be a very clear document which isn't subject to interpretation, different interpretations. That's just my opinion, so that's something that can be discussed at a later time if that's appropriate, or now.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Saab.
Yes, thank you. So, yeah, first I'd just like to respectfully disagree with Councillor Lerner that says that these larger lots won't be prohibited. Well, they are in section 11. They're limited to just 2, and I may have picked a poor example there, but along Dickinson Road, there's ones bigger than 1 acre that are R1 with sewer and water that would be limited to to this. So anyway, I think it would be helpful, just moving on to the solution, that you do make a good suggestion. I just thought I'd point that out, Director Robinson, that for those properties that would want to do this, right, just have a strata, development on the one big lot, done quite commonly, that I would hate to see the OCPs saying that, sorry, you have to subdivide into that, that's all. It just could be unintended consequences. I thought I'd mention that. So if 11 was removed, that would certainly solve things. Thank you.
Councillor Jones and then Councillor Lerner.
Yes, I agree with that, and I guess the main reason I feel 11 should be removed is it says will limit. My understanding is there's different language in the OCP. Sometimes it's shall be encouraged, may be considered, and then there's must kind of language, will kind of language. The latter language is what I would call strong language. You know, it must be followed when you see will and must used in these points. And that's why, to me, it's creates a bit of confusion and potentially conflicts with points 4 and 5. So I would also support removing that number 11 for that reason.
Councillor Lerner.
Thank you, Worship. I respectfully disagree with removing number 11. My thought is that currently, if a lot is greater than 4,050 meters squared, and they are allowed a house and a carriage house, 2 dwelling units, or a secondary suite, if the purpose at this time, if someone wants to, let's say, put 4 units per lot on a parcel of that size and make it strata, as was mentioned in this meeting, there would be, if I understand correctly, if without these statements, they could do that. If the zoning allowed it, they could do it without any rezoning, any subdivision, and therefore any requirement to contribute green space or amenities. If we have a parcel that is 4,050 meters squared or greater, if we have something that's 12 acres, I would be concerned about the impact on the community if they were able to put 4 dwellings on a lot through strata and not go through any process. Those are huge parcels in our community that we would hopefully have. They're often in special plan areas. I would say that they would be set aside for the opportunity to go through a public consultation process, a rezoning or a subdivision, and then we could have trails, green space, amenities, whatever it is that's negotiated or discussed. If that limitation is removed, and keep in mind, Bill 44 specifically says that 4,050 meters squared and greater is exempt, or greater than that is exempt. If we remove that, we're not only going beyond what Bill 44 allows, which is contradicting council's previous motions to only do what's required by Bill 44, but we're now opening up those parcels to strata development without any amenity contributions.
Okay, Councillor Savage and then myself and then Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you. Now that I've reread number 10, sorry, it's hard to keep up in real time here, but that is problematic to me as well, because it says by permitting the development of SMU only on parcels of 40, 50 meters squared or smaller. Yet the point I made is there may be bigger lots that would want to, be it they go through a rezoning process or whatever, but the OCP, I dare say, would want to support that if they want to go through a rezoning process and so on, but it's blanket here by stating that it doesn't say that whether they have to have sewer water or without sewer or water, or whether they're going through rezoning. It's a new policy. It's not a current policy. It's a new policy that states the OCP will not support permitting the development of SMU and SMU-like things only on parcels 450 meters squared and smaller. And so is number 11. It says basically the same thing. It'll limit development on residential lots exceeding 450 meters squared. And that's my point. There are examples of residential lots, meaning they have an R and a number after the R. They're zoned that way, whether they have sewer or not, sewer and water now or not. You're limiting them in the OCP, saying you don't support them having anything more than 2 dwellings per lot, that's all. It's a new policy that's limiting these lots, and I'm only talking about those parcels that would make delightful developments that are entitled to, that may apply for rezoning or parcel averaging, whatever, that's all. That was my only point. So it's something new that's not mandated by SMU, but we can leave it for now. I think we've probably discussed it enough, and we can leave it with Director Robinson to see how we could cure that. And then when we're actually voting on these things, we can have it part of the debate. Thank you very much.
Okay, Director Robinson, and then we have myself, and then Councillor Jones to speak next.
No, I wanted to say I really appreciate discussion. This was really my goal in this meeting was to get a really good discussion and get council's understanding of these amendments, because this is fantastic. So sorry to interrupt the debate, but thank you. I think to speak to something that Councillor Jones actually said about the language. So the district will prioritize is 10, and the district will limit is 11. So if you're seeking, what I'm kind of hearing from council's discussion is that if you're seeking to allow looking at other circumstances and you don't want to set up a conflict with the OCP policies that we're putting in right now, I would say keep 10 and strike 11 would be my advice. But
Yeah, the comment I was going to make, it just simply has to do, and I think Councillor Lerner touched on it a bit, is, you know, we have limited the scope of what we're doing here, and really it is for lots that are under, you know, the 4,050. And so if now we're looking at putting new policy in place for lots that are larger than that, I feel like that's now going above and beyond the scope of what we have set out to do, and probably would require a whole different level of consultation, because now we should be going out to those larger property owners through the entire district and inviting their feedback on how we can change policy to better support the potential development, or the development potential of all their lots. Not just one that's maybe being spotted on Dickinson or Lantzville Road or whatever. We should have expanded the scope of this before then, because now it's, yeah, I just think that's where we're at, is where we limited the scope intentionally. Now we have to kind of deal with that, and then if we want to do something later with larger lots and throughout the entirety of Lantzville, then do another OCP review at a later date. Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you for that, Mayor Swain. So given that the direction of council was to do only edits that are required by Bill 44, and that we will be having a document with the track changes, and I think that this actually saves us having a lot of discussion going through, because there are several places here where I would bring up the point that I think this is going beyond the direction of council, but I think we have an understanding now. So when we see the track changes, perhaps you'll feel free to reduce yourself the things that go beyond the direction of council and what's required for Bill 44.
Councillor Lerner.
Yeah, thank you. I respect what council's saying. I would be fine to strike number 11. If I do see the words "will limit" is quite stringent, so I'm fine to strike that. I do take the point that it deals with lots that are beyond the scope of Bill 44. So if there's consensus, and I know we're not voting on it tonight, but I would be fine with striking number 11 and keeping number 10. What I will say is, just to make a comment, that overall I'm quite pleased with how this document reads, and I'm not seeing anything in here that has me concerned about going beyond the scope of Bill 44. My understanding with points 10, 11 is that is the lot size that was Bill 44 specifically spelled out, so I think that there was good intentions behind putting 10 and 11 in there. But as Mayor Swain did mention, if we're dealing with any kind of restrictions on lots beyond that, our consultation may have to expand. So my thought would be to strike number 11 and keep 10. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
So through to Director Robinson, we could make that recommendation this evening. Would that be what you're looking for?
that would be helpful. Any kind of recommendations that the committee wants to make, or any other discussion. This is very, like I said, this is very informative for me. It's very helpful. But yeah, if you wanted to make a recommendation to strike 11, I can take that out when I'm preparing the bylaws.
Yeah, so I'll get the motion on the floor that the committee recommends to council that under 5.2.7 subsection, whatever, residential, that number 11 or subsection 11 be struck. Second by Councillor Lerner. And through the staff, does that work? I think I got it right. All right. Further discussion on the amendment, which is just a strike 11, or the recommendation to council to strike 11. Okay, hearing nothing, I'll move to call in the question then. All those in favor, opposed, that's carried unanimously. All right, through to council, anything further on 5.2.7? Okay, let's continue on.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the next thing that we wanted to talk about was the development permit guidelines. This updates DPA to the village form and character to address residential development of 4 units or less. If council recalls, these guidelines were written with the village core where we're sitting today in mind, and with larger multifamily developments in consideration. And they don't apply very well to, they don't apply as well to small scale residential developments. SMOO was really just not contemplated when the OCP process was being reviewed and finalized in 2019. Staff have drafted and have consulted on new small-scale multi-unit housing development permit guidelines tailored to duplexes, townhouses, row house development. More suitable than the predecessor residential and mixed combination policies. They're focused on mitigating the impacts of development in established residential areas. The tailored guidelines for small-scale multi-unit housing provide clarity to existing residents who are looking to build something like a SMOO development, and they help to provide faster review times, and ultimately, the form and character permits come to council for review, so clarifying the guidelines also helps council. Draft updates to the guidelines are included as attachment 3, and as you go through attachment 3, you can see each subsection is kind of headlined with the actual form of the building, just to help clarify which guidelines apply to a duplex or which guidelines apply to a townhouse. So I hope, and small apartment buildings. So that's kind of how it was structured. I'm happy to take any questions that you have about those.
Okay, through to council, questions? Go ahead, Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you. So DPA 8, when we have the track changes, the document will be able to compare. Right now, numbers don't match up, so 33 in the OCP is not the same. Well, actually, 33 is the same, but other numbers, may not be. So that will get straightened out for in the future, so I'm great with that. I wanted to point out that one of the problems that this community has had with the OCP has been the strength of the language in it. And we had a discussion about this, I believe, before you joined Staff Director Robinson, because when something says should be, that's not a compelling, that's not strong language. And the OCP actually discusses this in the first few pages of the OCP. So when I read through these things, many of them are fantastic. They really give the feeling of the vision for the community, but because the language is weak, should be, are encouraged. This doesn't mean that these guidelines are going to be followed, and that is totally fair enough, because that is the way the language is written. For this particular attachment, there are 29 points which use language which is weak language, like should be. There are 4 points which use strong language, like shall, and there are 3 points that don't specify with the language what they are. This is just the little bit of work that I did on this. So what is your recommendation going forward, Director Robinson, with these, so that many of these guidelines, which are wonderful and extremely important, what is your recommendation to get a little more following as we develop as a community of these guidelines?
What I will say is, and you use the word many times there, is that they're guidelines. They're meant to capture the form and a broad set of circumstances that would apply to that form. There may be decisions where there may be something that was drafted with a should that may not apply to all circumstances in that development. And I would say that since the form and character guidelines are intended to kind of paint a vision for the character and the development of the building, there may be some situations where some buildings come forward and certain guidelines may not be applicable based on the orientation of the building, based on the size of the building, based on the context. So some of the guidelines that we drafted with like a should were keeping a variety of different circumstances in mind, whereas some guidelines that you spoke to that said have shall were ones that they be very easy to comply with, or should be very easy to comply with based on a variety of different development circumstances. When we were drafting these guidelines, we went through a number of different built form examples and kind of tested them out and everything else. And it's important that the guidelines be understood by residents, the community, and council. And so we're trying to keep the language flexible enough, but at the same time, if there's repeated guidelines that an application comes forward with and it says should, and they just say, no, I'm not doing that because it says should, council can ultimately say, well, it says you should do this, why aren't you doing this? So if there's a should in there and it says, I'm not doing it because X, Y, Z, council can have a bit more discretion over if it has hard language in a guideline and a development proposal comes forward, then and it can't comply with a guideline, then that makes the reviewing and approving the process with council much more difficult. So that's my spiel on guidelines. I've worked with different development permit guidelines in 3 different provinces, and it's my experience that using that softer language when you're dealing with small scale built forms to get a good outcome is better than being overly prescriptive.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for that. So I think going forward, and perhaps tonight isn't this the time for this, we should have some discussion of how we can see that guidelines are in some a little bit more applied. There was an application some time ago, I won't say what, and I actually went through the DPA and went through the application and pretty much came up with the only things that were followed were the ones with shall. And in these guidelines applicable to residential development, we have 29 points which are should language. Now, if none of those are followed, then that is a large percentage of the guidelines, 29 out of 36, that aren't being taken up in the development. So I think that's a problem when you have an OCP with so many guidelines that may potentially not be followed. So I don't know what the solution is for that. If, as a planner, the flexibility is needed, I understand that. Yet a higher percentage of compliance would probably be more in keeping going forward with the intent of the OCP.
Okay, I had myself down next and then Councillor Savage. Yeah, so I guess on, because we don't have the page numbers there, but it would be number 44 under parking, loading and access in the agenda. And it basically just says under building parking shall be required. So there's that stronger language for 3- and 4-story apartment buildings and so on. My question or concern around this is when we look at the small scale multi-unit housing, the whole intent of it is centered around affordability and increasing, housing supply and so on. And my concern about, the requirement with the underbuilding parking, because I'm assuming this would also include underground parking, is, each spot is $30,000 to $40,000 of additional cost just for parking. So I look across the street to the new apartment building that's being built. It's all surface parking, and if we all of a sudden required them, to actually put in underground parking, the amount of extra cost per unit is, it would definitely move it out of the affordability range for a lot of people, or potentially could add to that and so on. And I don't think that's the intent we're after. So maybe through to Director Robinson, is there a way of kind of somehow differentiating this? Like, you know, I can understand with a larger scale development versus some of these, because you know, that apartment building across the street, in my opinion, would probably fall more in line. You know, it's on an acre lot. Anyways, I'll let you respond.
No, it's a great question, sir. So this is under the residential section. So this would apply to 4-story apartments, so residential only buildings. There's a separate section of the guidelines that applies to combined use buildings with the intent of having some surface parking for the commercial uses. So I think that's in a separate section. But to speak to your question, I think you're absolutely right. Parking spaces can be very expensive to provide, especially underground. It definitely adds a cost and makes some projects unfeasible. So I mean, this one was drafted, was a modified version of a guideline that was previously in the document. So if council wants to turn that shall to a should, that may be an option. I mean, I think the intent here is, again, that this is the policies that I spoke to that were in the original 2019 version that we needed to get a little update to. And so this was, so I think the intent of this policy was always like apartments or seniors housing located around the village core. So it's required for 3 to 4 unit buildings and just strongly encouraged for 2-story buildings. And so the other way I would read that is a lot of small scale multi-unit housing is all in residential zones where the height limit is 2 stories. So this would not be a requirement for smaller buildings. Yeah.
Point noted. And, you know, just as a follow-up to that, in just my general remarks, when we look at the long-term care facility that's being built, one of the changes in the redesign, if you've had a chance to look at it, was they reduced underground parking. And we have to remind ourselves, well, why? And it's to reduce cost. So they've gone to more surface parking and reduced underground parking to try and save some money. I had a couple other points, but go ahead, Councillor Jones.
Yes, this may not be the time for this discussion, but I do have a comment on it since you brought it up, Mayor Swain. The restricting parking, first of all, I understand it's expensive to provide, but in my opinion, what we should have with residential development that comes to Lantzville is we should have the ability for the people who move in there to park whatever vehicles they may have. And unfortunately, we don't live in an area that has good transit, so it just isn't an option for people who are living in Lantzville to hop on a bus or even hop on a car, an e-bike, and commute to work. We don't have that infrastructure in this community. So if you put residential in without the parking, there's going to be a problem because cars are going to be all over the place. And my opinion, again, if a couple move into a small apartment, adults working, the probability is that each of them have a car. So I would think the solution to this would be that a parking plan needs to be provided with an application for residential. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of cars on the streets in Lantzville. And that's where the point I'm making probably needs to go for another day. So I'll just leave it with councillors to ponder.
Councillor Lerner and then Councillor Savage.
Thank you. Through your worship to staff, just want to make sure I understand that, because I was a bit confused by the discussion there. Number one, if I understand correctly, we kept the parking requirements. I think it was 2 stalls per unit for residential. Is that correct?
There were no changes to parking requirements proposed under this project at all.
Okay, so the number of spots required per unit remains the same. Okay, and then, but when it comes to this DPA 8 changes section 44, if I understood what was said correctly, this applies only to units that are exclusively residential. So in other words, if it was a building that had commercial on the bottom floor, this number 44 of under-building parking wouldn't apply. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, because my concern was reducing the assessed value by having parking take up the bottom floor as opposed to commercial space, but this is only for residential only, and only within a 300-meter walking distance of the village core. My other question was with regard to under building versus underground. And which does this encompass in the sense of, I know it says under building, but I've heard the phrase used for under building to include underground parking. I've also heard underground classified separately, whereas there's above ground but under building. In other words, the first floor is parking and then above that is residential. I've heard both phrases used in different contexts.
That's a good point, sir. I would say that underbuilding would apply to either below the first story or at the first story.
Okay, thank you. So in other words, if it was a 3-story building, the first floor, they could comply by having the first floor be above ground parking and or half the first floor being above ground parking, let's say, and then the other 2.5 stories being the units themselves. But it would still be tax assessed as residential because the parking would be part of the residential suite, in other words.
That's correct, sir. And I've done apartment projects in other cities where you have like almost the entire first floor is under building parking, and it's nicely screened and it's nicely landscaped. And then the only part of the actual building that's at grade is the lobby and the elevators and the garbage room and the loading stuff for all. And
I
then
see.
the dwellings don't actually start until you get to the second floor.
Okay, but either way, it wouldn't affect, this is only, this doesn't affect commercial buildings, so either way, it would, okay, thank you.
Councillor Savage?
Yep, so with these sections here, the whole section in the current OCP, I was on the OCP committee and on council when we passed the OCP. And this was originally intended, most of these points under, DPA 8 were applying to the village improvement plan. And you can't keep track of everything in the OCP. It's a big document, otherwise it would take you 20 years to get done. But it really puzzled me. It didn't come from the committee, all this stuff, but why it appears in the OCP twice. The DP8's almost identical to the village improvement one, and it's very peculiar because it has things that apply only to commercial, yet for some reason it applies this form and character to developments with 4 units or more that have no commercial at all. So it's odd that way. And in the current ones we're presented here, with all of them, there's only 5 that have a mandate. That's 4.1, 40, that's 41, 44, 48, 50, and 68. So out of 68, there's only 5 that are mandated. Now, the other thing is that I don't know what's new in all these pages, which are current items which have been amended, or which are current items in the current OCP that are not amended. So I really can't speak in an informed way on any of this until we get the highlighted changes and what was changed, which some are referring to as tracking. So, and my comment on the underbuilding parking as well, that I would want to make sure that it would not apply to anything in the village, which is supposed to be all commercial on the main floor. And if you have underbuilding parking, you're eating up your commercial space, and that dilutes the commercial tax rate as applied to the land. It creates a ratio that's far more residential tax assessed value to the commercial tax assessed value. That's what determines how the land it sits on is taxed. So at some point, I'll be making a motion or proposing that we have something in the form and character since we seem to be amending it, some of these form and character items, to ensure, leaving it up to Director Robinson, not being overly prescriptive, but to ensure that there's adequate commercial on the main floor, because this is what can happen is what's supposed to be a commercial and civic area, or a tiny little commercial core, which is about 14 acres, that's it, in a community as area-wise as huge as Lantzville. And with growth, we'll need far more commercial acreage than that. That if we keep getting nothing but residential with just tiny bits of commercial on the main floor, because the main floor is eaten up with parking and storage for apartment buildings and so, apartment units and so on. I just thought I'd point that out, not for tonight, but when I get a handle on all these changes, I'm hoping we can do that in form and character. Perhaps it's outside the mandate, in which I'll keep it outside the mandate, but I think that's important to do to protect the commercial space of future, mixed-use buildings in the village anyway. And so if I could conclude, is there a general way, Director Robinson, through chair to staff, that you could summarize in these pages, attachment 3, going from the 21st page to the 26th page? Are there headings here that are purely for the form and character of the SMU, which we motion to do? I couldn't figure that out. For example, duplexes and small apartments, 2 to 4 units, that's 62 to 68. Is that all new for SMU? And if so, are there other sections in here that are brand new that aren't part of the current form and character that relate just to SMU? I just don't know that. Thank you.
Your worship, to the councillor, items 49 to 68 are all brand new. They are the housing typology specific guidelines that council asked for through the motion. Just to speak to your point about the combined use buildings, they're not included in the scope of this review. I was given direction to only look at the residential development guidelines. So that's all I looked at. And that's all I consulted with the public on. The other ones, so in attachment 3, section 11.10.4.1, general guideline for all residential development. Some pieces from here were modified, clarified, reorganized. So those ones are largely the same as what was in before, but they've been modified. Section 11.10.4.2, housing typology specific guidelines, 49 to 68, those are all new.
Yeah, sorry, what was that?
Items 49 to 68
Yeah.
on your attachment 3 are all new.
Okay, they're all new. All right, thank you. And the other ones in there can be modified, so we'll wait till we get the so-called tracking to see just what's happened there. That's helpful. Thank you.
I did have a question about one of the new ones. So that would be under 67, and just kind of maybe a weird question, but it just says, or reads, shared parking areas for a duplex located on the fronting street should contain a dividing landscape buffer. So what I'm curious is, and it says between unit parking stalls, so I'm assuming a unit would imply, like, sometimes it's 2 parking stalls. So in terms of this dividing landscape buffer, could that be like a strip of grass, strip of gravel? Like, is it just something to delineate the 2 parking stalls per unit? Because it's usually 2 per unit, but.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. So the intent here is, and you may have seen this in areas that I'm aware, there's a duplex side by side, and they both have a front garage, and they both have like a shared driveway apron that comes together because it's strata, so they have a shared apron. And the intent there is actually between the 2 units' garages, in what would be the driveways, to have a little landscape strip in there that would actually break up that sea of concrete in the front driveway.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. But in terms of like what that landscape buffer would look like, it could be It could be just like decorative rock, it could be whatever, right? Or,
Plants, decorative rock, grass, something to just break up the concrete and allow for drainage.
okay, sure, thank you. I think that's all I had. I don't know if any other members of council have anything else to ask. Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yes, I don't know where it's in here, but there was one reference to duplexes being required or encouraged, I can't find it here, to have on-site parking along the sides and back. And also in terms of our current form and character, there's elements of Bill 44 which prohibit either on-site parking or very limited on-site parking. I forget what it exactly says. So are there anything in our current form and character and the new proposed form and character that would be in conflict with this idea of very limited on-site parking?
Through your worship to the councillor, a great question. Section 68 is actually parking areas for small apartments shall be located in the rear or side yard of the building. So the intent there is that the 4-unit apartment be moved forward on the lot and that people drive around the back or on the side depending on how large the lot is. That wouldn't apply for a 2-unit duplex building. Most of those designs that we see, especially here in the region, all have attached garages, so they all need a driveway of some sort. They're in the provincial small-scale multi-unit housing guideline document. It does give guidance that council should reduce the number of required parking spaces for small-scale multi-unit housing. But again, that was guidance that council elected not to follow last year.
Yeah, to not mandate it. All right, thanks for clearing that up. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I was just gonna comment on that briefly, and I think part of it is because Lantzville has generously large sized lots. You know, we should be able to accommodate parking and not limit it. So, you know, basically the parking stalls aren't taking up potential area for foundations, that kind of thing. But yeah, go ahead, Director Robinson.
No, you're absolutely correct, sir. And some of the few folks that have come in and said, hey, I want to build 2 duplexes here, or I want to build a townhouse here, and they've got draft drawings, none of them are asking for parking variance. They're able to accommodate it because of large lot sizes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes, through the chair, Director Robinson, the wisdom of having a space, dividing space between the duplexes with a shared apron is very, very good idea. I had some experience with this in Squamish with a family member living in a duplex shoveling snow. And there was only a small space, and the snow pile was taller than I was, trying to get all the snow, all of 8-10 inches that had fallen on the driveway, off the driveway, and still keep it just on this little space that was available. So here we may not have that much snow, but you do all have cars parked there and doors that open, so it's nice to be able to get out of your car and open your door and not be banging the car door of your neighbors. So I fully support that apron and wonder if maybe there should be a prescribed width to it in order that it be fully functional.
Okay, I guess next, oh, Councillor Lerner, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question as far as our OCP and the transit circle. There was the transit-orientated housing legislation that required us to have anything within 400 meters of the transit hub. And we know there was talk of the transit hub could move and then the circle would move and all these things. But I believe within the transit-oriented circle, there are very prescriptive, I would say, the opposite of limits. There's a minimum that we cannot deny. And I'm wondering which form and character applies to sort of buildings within the transit circle. Is it a new special one, or is it this new one, or something existing?
An excellent question, sir. The transit circle loop that crosses our boundary from Nanaimo captures 4 parcels. Two of them are owned by the Ministry of Transport. Two of them are owned by long-term landholders in Vancouver, I understand. They're unserviced. I haven't seen any applications come forward for those. I don't even know if they know that it's captured under this. But to answer your question, it would be the general guidelines for all residential development if it was a residential proposal, or it would be the guidelines for the combined use building if they wanted to have commercial uses on the main floor.
Okay, thank you. So in other words, it's not its own DPA guidelines. It's basically reverting to what is the standard.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I guess next section, please.
Oh, fantastic. All right. Sorry, I'll bring the presentation back up here. Oh, uh-oh. Here we go. Community engagement. So in addition to the regular council and committee of the whole meetings, we hosted 2 information sessions on July 22nd and July 24th. One of them was over at Costin Hall. The other one was right up here in council chambers. So I have attached a community engagement summary in attachment 4, which also includes the poster boards that were up at the engagement sessions and the written comment forms that we received and the one email that someone sent. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the engagement events.
Okay, through to council, questions, comments? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Lerner.
I think my only comment is, I really appreciate all the opportunities for public feedback that took place and engagement. I think that there is confusion in the community, not because of anything council or staff or anyone said, but confusion as to what this new legislation entails a little bit, because for example, I won't give the address, but there was a notice posted on the district website for a variance on a property that could potentially have 4 units. And I received a lot of calls and emails saying, please don't approve 4 units. And I kind of had to say, actually, we don't get a vote on whether or not there's 4 units. We get a vote on whether the variance is granted. And so I appreciate this. I just think as we go through this process and we get to the point where we're going to have a public hearing, I would encourage the opportunity to post as much as possible on of notices and information so that people are aware that it's provincially mandated and it's not some random thing being done by the district, because I think there is some confusion. But that's just my feedback.
Councillor Savage and then Councillor Jones.
Yes, through chair to staff, I noticed these 5, 6 public inputs are redacted. And could I ask, please, what our current policy is, in that we passed a motion to not redact these public input. So if that policy is not yet in place, what's the policy in the meantime? And also, could we be sent unredacted versions of these 5, please, or these 6?
Through your worship to the councillor, we confirmed that they were all from Lantzville residents, and then we redacted it in line with provincial privacy requirements. I don't know if the corporate officer would like to add to that.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Council. We did update the procedure bylaws. Council will remember to require the names and addresses to be made public. So I actually think we should have done that in this case, but we had a habit of doing it the opposite way, so I can understand how it appeared here. We can provide it to Council unredacted, but names and addresses are required to appear now per the procedure bylaw.
Great, no problem. Thanks very much for clearing that up.
Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you. Just a comment here on a statement, refine and finalize amendments. I read here, staff will draft and publish the amending bylaws based on feedback from the public and direction from the September Committee of the Whole. It's my understanding, please correct me if I am wrong, that the bylaws being amended can only be done by direction from council.
That gets to the project schedule point, which is my next point. So after the Cal meeting, we will refine and finalize the amendments and introduce bylaws for council consideration. Council provided staff with direction in the work plan approval to bring bylaws forward in the fall.
Okay, additional comments? I've got a few myself, just based on the consultation that was done. Again, we don't have page numbers, but it's okay. Again, I have to keep going back to the intent of Bill 44, and that's to obviously increase housing supply and affordability. So when I see a comment there, good opportunity to increase housing options and affordability, I don't not necessarily agree with that, because when we look at limiting a second dwelling in the form of like a house, whether that's a carriage house or a garden suite, you take your pick, and we're limiting that to 90 square meters in light of all the fees that a person would have to pay and hookups and everything equivalent to a house, much larger to whatever parcel coverage would allow. It doesn't seem like it's allowing our residents, our current residents, to have much utility with respect to what can be built. So I look at we permit within the zoning bylaw right now a carriage house, which can be up to 960 square feet, but and the same applies to garden suites. It's a one-story building. But again, what it doesn't allow or lend itself well to is younger families, younger people who want to get into the housing market, that may have generous parents that will say, yes, you may build on our lot. And what they're limited to is a small dwelling where they pay all the same fees as if it was a house. To me, that doesn't scream very good news, in my opinion, to, if someone really wanted to maybe, give their kids an opportunity to build a house in Lantzville and raise a young family, like a 3-bedroom rancher, which might only be 1,400 square feet, but is something that's still in the realm of affordability to build. So, when I see comments in there about, good opportunity to increase housing options, well, I look at the other things that are there, and it's like duplex, triplex, fourplex, whatever, row homes. I think for current residents that are looking at trying to take care of their, maybe their children's needs and so forth, recognizing how extremely unaffordable the housing market is, and it's only getting more grim as we march forward into the years to come. Like, I think we need to potentially look at that. Again, the next bullet there, yeah, I got you noted, Councillor Jones. As planning for the future is necessary and young people are struggling with housing affordability. Well, if you allow another house, what that opens up is another potential suite, whether that's a mortgage helper or it's for income or what have you. But what it allows for is by having 2 suites on one property, is another dwelling unit that is more affordable. And again, I don't know if we're going to have statements around affordability in our OCP, then I think we need to move that back to our zoning bylaw and make sure that's in alignment. But the problem we're in right now is the fact that we did our zoning bylaw first, and really your zoning bylaw should be based on your OCP. So we're working backwards to create the policy to support what you have. But again, this part I'm really struggling with is the affordability piece, and I just don't know how we're gonna really sell that idea, because for someone to actually build another larger dwelling unit on their property, they have to build a duplex. That's the only way they can do it, build a duplex. But now you're looking at extra DCCs, extra building permit fees, extra water connection fees. Now you're stripping away the affordability piece. It is a loophole in what we have. So if you're really dead set on having a second house on your property, it's easy, build a duplex. And then you can rent out the other half and so on. But all we're doing is making it more difficult for people to build a second house on their property, or if we do allow them to build a second house, it has to be in the form of a carriage house or garden suite, which is capped at 960 square feet. Doesn't scream, hey, this is going to be good for young families and so forth. The other part I noticed, and just in the summary there, was just in the last paragraph, it speaks to people wanting to, wanting Lantzville to hold on to its rural character. It's this whole, concept of rural character. I understand it, and people have debated this and argued this for a long time. And are we really rural? Are we more semi-rural? Are we in fact maybe more urban? I think in Lantzville we have to recognize we definitely have urban areas. Wherever you have water and sewer in front of a residential lot, hate to break it to everybody, that's urban. So the one thing I've always recognized and always spoken to, quite proudly, is that Lantzville does have these beautiful rural corridors. And I think when you marry the two, you end up with this, maybe what I would describe as a semi-rural community. But let's not make any mistake, we're in the middle of an urban area right now. We have sewer and water. So I think, I think we have to sometimes, make sure that the language that's reflected in our OCP is congruent to, what the actual conditions on the ground really are. And I think there's maybe some conflicts there, but other than that, I think that's all I had. I thought I maybe had, but anyways, go ahead, Councillor Jones. I'm sure I can always come back to if I have more.
Yeah, some good points there that certainly when sewer and water comes, you start looking at an urban zone or potentially an urban zone. So I think that's something for residents to be very aware of. That might not be understood by all, that is the impact of water and sewer. With respect to your points earlier, I think you're raising a topic that council's already debated and passed motions on. I don't know if that was your intention, but I'm not prepared to speak to it tonight. I don't know that it's something that we can respectfully revisit when we've already dealt with it.
Councillor Lerner, go ahead.
Yeah, just a few things based on what was discussed. It's a very good point the mayor raises about doing the zoning based on the OCP. That was one of the difficulties I had with the legislation, was that it mandated it go the other way around. So it wasn't that we decided to do the zoning ahead of the OCP. The deadline stated that you had to do the zoning, then the housing needs report, then the OCP, which to me, it would have been a very different lineup if it was something that was more well thought out. As far as the urban versus rural or semi-rural, I would say that we are definitely semi-rural, and I don't say that based on random definition. I'm taking the official Statistics Canada definition, which states that you have to have a density of 400 people per square kilometer in order to be classified as urban. So you have to have a population concentration of at least 1,000 people and 400 people per square kilometer. And I don't think we have 400 people per square kilometer. So I don't think we classify in Canada as urban. I agree that we are near an urban area, and I agree that we are probably not entirely rural. So I think the semi-rural definition fits. As far as affordability, I concur that we are in a situation where affordability in all of British Columbia, but especially places like the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island, has become very difficult, especially for young families. But I will say that I would respectfully disagree about Lantzville not necessarily fitting the definition of trying to do our part. I don't, just to paraphrase, my thought is that we had the option of allowing only carriage houses or only secondary suites, and we decided to allow either, in fact both. You could have a duplex each with a secondary suite. So we went above and beyond on that. And I would also note that some of the housing options for 4 units were optional. So for example, there were a number of things to choose from 4 plexes to 2 duplexes and so on, and we allowed up pretty much all of them. So I think we've probably gone beyond what many other populations of 4,000 in a municipality would do. I concur that certainly the idea of being able to have more suites or more carriage houses will allow for more affordability in the sense that they would be able to apply a larger residence on a lot for children. However, like a parents providing that to children. And I do think that's valuable. And there are a number of instances in Lantzville. We heard of 28 secondary suites or carriage houses with permits in this area. I know of a number that have happened in the last few years that have been specifically to allow that exact scenario of either senior parents or young children to move into carriage houses. And indeed, this council has granted setback variances to make those exact scenarios happen. My thought on this is, I think we've passed our zoning amendments already. We have a deadline of December 31st that's fast approaching in order to have the OCP match. So I think we proceed with what's required in order to meet that deadline. The last thing I would want to do is be in non-compliance. And if at that point it's council's will to go back and make further changes to the zoning, we could at that point, but I wouldn't want to revisit the zoning when we only have 3.5 months to meet compliance. Thank you.
Councillor Savage?
Yes, now, Councillor Lerner, my wife does so much online shopping that I swear there's at least 400 delivery men around my place. So sometimes my area is urban, I hate to tell you. And the last thing, through chair to staff, if I may, and I'm just wondering, Director Robinson, if you're, I'm not advocating it, if you're putting any new pictures in the OCP?
That was not my intent, sir. I think there's a couple maps that we're trying to get the RDN to give us updates on based on just adding parcel sizes and new roads to, but that would be the extent of it.
Okay, well, that's great. If you are, I'm sure Councillor Lerner would like to get in on a couple of them, so you'd be immortal then, wouldn't you? But no, I agree with that's beyond what yep, thank you.
Yeah, for myself, again, just responding to some of the remarks. Yeah, I agree, Councillor Lerner. Like, it is a little late obviously, well, not even late in the process. But I think it's something we have to consider is the whole concept of affordability. In my opinion, I don't think the net result is going to be affordable, and there could be improvements down the road to make things more affordable and again have higher utility. I have spoken to the director of planning about this a little bit, and it's kind of what are people looking to do, or what gives them the highest use on their properties, and the one thing I would note is when we have someone doing a fourplex in a residential area that is predominantly single family. You kind of have to ask yourself, is maybe a different housing form that would be included in our zoning and OC or supported by our OCP, would that maybe have negated that? And I think that the housing form of having 2 houses with 2 suites is probably far more desirable than a fourplex in the middle of a residential neighborhood that's predominantly single family. Sticks out like a sore thumb. So in terms of having some continuity and of housing form throughout a subdivision, it's much easier to achieve with increased options. And again, we didn't really have a whole lot of time when we actually went through the zoning, and I don't believe I'd have to go back and look again. I don't think there was a whole lot of consultation either. And quite honestly, I think in this, even today, I don't think a lot of people understand Bill 44 and the ramifications to zoning. And I think we even heard about that tonight from Councillor Lerner when he's fielding phone calls and emails from people about like, how can this be? How can you have a fourplex go up in my neighborhood? And again, I think it's because so few people actually know the intricacies of Bill 44 and how it's carrying out and how it's being implemented in everybody's communities. I'm happy we had the open houses. They were done in the summertime. No criticism to staff, but again, if maybe they were held later or additional ones were held, maybe we would have more uptake, more feedback. But here we are under the gun, and we need to move forward, right? So, but again, the part I really struggle with is affordability, and when you start realizing some of the stuff or what current people can do on their lots or residents can do on their lots, a lot of the options are just not realistic, and they increase, you know, the cost inflation, or the costs to do anything are just, you know, increased because, you know, per unit, per dwelling unit, then that means extra DCCs, extra water connection, extra building permit fees, and I'm sure the list goes on. That only adds to the final ticket price, and especially when you're looking at residents trying to look after maybe their families, or maybe make some money for their families or whatever, it just doesn't work. So anyways, I'll leave my remarks there. I'm sure I'll have plenty more when we actually get this back next time around. But Director Robinson, do we have anything further? I know you kind of jumped ahead there to the next steps and the timelines and so forth.
No worries, sir. Just wanted to provide clarity to council that this is very beneficial, as I said. September Committee of the Whole meetings on the chart there is as a key milestone for the project. I'm going to take this away and take out number 11 that we talked about in the residential chapter, and then finalize bylaws and bring them forward to council for review and consideration. Our target council meeting for that is October 8th.
Excellent. Anything further from council in terms of amendments? Okay, we'll consider this presentation done. So thank you very much, Director Robinson, for all of the work thus far, and good luck with all the work to come. Moving on to item 8, so we have introduction of late items. Any late items to be introduced? Okay, here seeing nothing. Public clarification, we have nobody in the gallery. I don't think we have anybody remotely registered or has joined us remotely. Nobody? Okay, thank you. So we've made it through our agenda, so I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.